just would like to say thank you, Pastor Bob and Elliot, for sharing this pulpit with me. This is an honor. I'm thankful to be at Abundant Life Church.
Amen.
You know, when I drive by this place sometimes during the day, I give thanks to God for Abundant Life Church. God's just really done some amazing things here. He's done some amazing things in me, through me, and through so many people that I'm around. So it's just good to be here. And again, I want to thank you for sharing your time with me this morning. The title of today's message is But God. And I'm assuming that we all have heard that phrase somewhere before, but God. You know, this has happened to me, but God. Or somebody did this, but God. And I'm going to read a few scriptures here. I'm going to go through them fairly fast. And they should be up on the board. I'm reading probably a different version than what will be up on the board. So I'm going to start in Genesis 31:42. It says, but God has seen my hardship and the toil of my hands. In Genesis 50:20, it says, you intended to harm me, but God intended it for good to accomplish what is now being done. In 1 Samuel 23:14, but God did not give David into his hands. In 1 Kings 5:4, but now the Lord my God has given me rest on every side, and there is no adversary or disaster. In Psalm 49:15, but God will redeem my life from the grave. In Psalm 73:26, my flesh and my heart may fail, but God is the strength of my heart and my portion forever. In Romans 5:8, but God demonstrates his own love for us in this, while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. And in 1 Corinthians 1:27, but God chose the foolish things of this world to shame the wise. God chose the weak things of the world to shame the strong. And this morning I want to tell you the story of a boy whose greatest declaration was, but God. And the introduction to his heartache began as a child. His parents divorced when he was 1.5 years old, and as long as he could remember, he was surrounded by alcoholism. He had multiple stepfathers, stepdads in his life, and most of whom were abusive to his mother, or himself and his siblings and his mother. And as far back as he could remember, he could recount the screaming and the yelling and sometimes the physical altercations. And when he was 7 years old, he walked into the kitchen to find his mother laying in a pool of blood. And although she survived that altercation, that trauma would no doubt leave scars in this boy that would manifest itself in ways for years to come. And life experiences, by all accounts, had rendered this boy as damaged goods, as the product and epitome of dysfunction, even at such a young age. And coping and survival became his mechanisms of life. The boy was learning to cope and survive both mentally and physically in what he only knew as a cruel world. And early in life, he would find that survival meant dabbling with any vice that could remove him from reality, or perhaps just alter it a little. And the experiences of his life would have fixed lenses into this boy's eyes. He no longer seen life as the way a child should. He didn't long for time on the playground. He didn't long for the soothing and comforting words from his parents. He did not dream about his future. He didn't dream about being a football star, or a movie star, or somebody famous. But only fear, anxiety, panic, and inadequacy gripped his mind and held him captive. And in his life, poverty was a given. Growing up primarily with a single alcoholic parent did not afford much opportunity. And no money meant there was no ability to get involved with activities that could keep him off the streets. And the boy continued to look for escapes. And through the marred lenses and a fear-gripped mind, he was destined to present to this world another misfit, another dysfunctional citizen that would most likely end up in the system, any system. And he did not know what a normal childhood was. And the boy was already difficult to deal with even at a pre-adolescent age. At that point, if a doctor could have been afforded, he probably would have been given some type of mood-altering drugs. At 10 years old, he disobeyed his mother's demand that he not leave on his bike to go visit a friend, and just a few blocks from his house, he was run over by a vehicle. And through multiple broken bones and injury to his spine and several weeks in the hospital, the doctors told him that he would most likely develop a degenerative spine disorder, and by his mid-30s would most likely be crippled and in a wheelchair. And this boy, he grew up not having a value for life. He was stricken with fear, insecurity, inadequacy. And nothing he did in his mind's eye was good enough. He did not feel as though he measured up to any decent standard, even though he could not distinguish decency. And by the age of 11, he was sneaking beer and liquor and cigarettes from his mother because he knew how these things could alter reality. And although sampling these things at such a young age, they would soon lead to addictions that he would deal with for many years in life. And later he was stealing enough liquor to completely intoxicate himself to the point of sickness. And although he hated the feeling the next day and swore he would never do it again, he was often powerless to stop that desire for an altered reality. At 12 years old, intoxicating himself was a normal thing to do on weekends. He befriended others that were more than willing to drink and smoke, further propelling himself down a road that he did not care how long or how short it was. He had no perception of what a future could hold. And he only knew through life the lenses that a dysfunctional upbringing had affixed to his mind's eye: sorrow, pain, apathy, no regard for life. At 14, without seeking permission and surprisingly with no objection from his mother, he moved in with a friend, and the parties never seemed to end. Drinking alcohol was a normal thing to do, but now other substances were presented as well. New ways to alter reality. And by the age of 16, the boy was a full-blown alcoholic. Fearless of the consequences, the boy would try and use any substance that was available. And without supervision, he would often skip school and sometimes show up to school intoxicated from the night before. And on many occasions, he would wake up in the morning not knowing how he got there or even where he was. And oftentimes the nights would not end until his running crowd had committed their crimes or they had tangled with the wrong people. And fights were nearly a daily occurrence, and as he grew older, the fights no longer consisted of just fists, but now weapons. And the weapons were becoming more dangerous. And after certain circumstances, this boy started carrying a gun himself. And without consideration or consequence, he was prepared to use it, and oftentimes eager to do so. He would later drop out of school, and sometimes weeks would pass by before there was even a moment of sobriety. And the days were only separated by the amount of alcohol he could consume before passing out. And the boy accepted this as a way of life. He lived for the moment. He never considered the future. And by this point, he truly believed that he would not see his 18th birthday. And he didn't know how to care. In life, he knew only of dysfunction, apathy, insecurity, fear, abuse, hopelessness, and addiction, but God. You see, I know this boy's story because that boy was me. And this is my personal testimony. And it's hard to tell, and I even to the extent of telling this, I still hold back. My kids, which several of them are sitting in here, they haven't even heard this much of my testimony. Most people don't know. I don't share the things in my life. I hold back, and there's certain things I won't ever speak of. And there's just no reason. It's not that I repress it. I just don't see the need to ever speak of some of the things I've either been through or done. And you know, I painted a picture here of a dysfunctional childhood and a scarred child, but I also need to make it clear that prior to my salvation, sinning was fun. There was things that I liked to do that at that point I didn't realize was sin, but looking back, I know it was. And one of the ways I coped with a laundry list of inadequacies was to be extreme. And when you couple that with sin, you look for new ways to sin, new ways to take it to the next level. That meme that you've all seen, hold my beer, that was literal for me. I've said that many times. That was part of life. And I used to brag about some of the things I've done. I was proud of my sinful accomplishments. And looking back, you know, like I said, I don't think I realized that it was sin I just thought I was cool. I thought the things I did, I was the quintessential bad boy, and I liked that title. And that may be surprising to some because nobody knows my history, or very few people do. And that would probably surprise some, but that was me. I liked being the bad boy. I liked doing the fun things, so to speak. And I didn't care what others thought of me. And perhaps I was just living down to the labels that were placed on me. And as I grew older and looked back, I could see how God had always protected me. And there were so many times that I should have been dead from what I've done, countless times. Especially due to the extremism, the things I would take to the next level, I put myself in a great deal of harm many times over. And I shouldn't be alive today, but God. And God had a plan for me. And I don't think I ever purposely rejected God growing up. But it was just easier to hide from Him. And it's not that I grew up not having heard of God. It was just easier for me to cope with life through the mechanisms I had found in alcohol and substances and extremes. And looking back now, I can see how God has always been there for me. And God knew me then, and He knew how messed up I was. And so why did God choose me? Why did God extend His grace to me? And why did God not allow me to destroy myself, because I should have? And I don't know. I can't tell you that, but I can tell you that because of what God has done for me, my love for Him, my humility, it's immeasurable. It's incalculable how much I appreciate what God has done for me. And in Luke 7, verse 40, it says, "Then Jesus answered his thoughts. Simon," he said to the Pharisee, "I have something to say to you." "Go ahead, teacher," Simon replied. Then Jesus told him this story. "A man loaned money to two people, 500 pieces of silver to one and 50 pieces of silver to the other. But neither of them could repay him, so he finally forgave them, canceling their debts. Who do you suppose loved him more after that?" And Simon answered, "I suppose the one for whom he canceled the larger debt." That's right, Jesus said. And that was me. My debt of sin was so great. And there were times in my life, many times in my life, that I, like Paul, could say of all these sinners, I am chief. And you know, God works in mysterious ways. You see, now I can't judge anyone. I can't judge the alcoholic. I can't judge the user. I can't judge the criminal. I can't judge anybody. Who am I to judge someone who bears the same descriptions that I once bore? You know, God is a merciful God, and I don't think that it's possible for us to understand God's love for sinners, but not just sinners, but for everybody, even those who think you don't sin. And you see, that alcoholic mother of mine, who was scarred and abused herself, when she was sober, she took us to church. And there were many times when she was sober, I would walk by her room and I would see her on her knees praying, and I would hear her praying for her kids, and I'd hear her praying for others. So did God ignore the prayers of this woman because she was an alcoholic? No, absolutely not. And this alcoholic mother of mine was my introduction to God, to faith, to Christ. I would never have known this, or most likely not have known this, with the way I was growing up. It wasn't perfect, but man, at least it was an introduction. And you know, my salvation is a pretty neat story. It's quick, so I'll share it. But I guess it's probably in 1995, I just had a desire to start reading the Bible. And I would read for hours a day. And just the New Testament only. I didn't read the Old Testament. I just had a desire to read it. And I read the New Testament over and over again. And I can remember during this process, this salvation process, that I lost every friend I had. I was no longer cool. People just didn't want to, and guys, I'll be honest with you. I could remember during my salvation process, I can remember one time being absolutely inebriated, that's drunk, and talking about Jesus. It's not a great example, but I've been there. But, I can remember back and bragging about the things that I once did that I really thought was cool. I would pat myself on the back. Hey guys, check this out, guess what I did? And I can remember thinking that was so cool, and it wasn't until after that Christ got a hold of me, that he began to change me, that I realized, man, that really wasn't cool. That's really bad. I mean, you hurt a lot of people in what you were doing. You hurt a lot of people. You hurt yourself, your family. But I stand before you today as a former, whatever label you want to give me. And I was broken, but God fixed me. And I submitted to my calling, and God changed me. And why did he do this? I don't know. But I can tell you that God so dearly loves the insert label here. That's all of us. God so dearly loves all of us, no matter what. And since I was saved, I can assure you life hasn't been peachy. I've struggled with acceptance and insecurity all my life. I still do to this day. I struggle with being good enough. I don't excel in hardly anything. I'm not excellent. I don't have special gifts and talents. I don't have faith that can move mountains. And Bob's probably going to get on me to this, but it's in my notes. I'm not living my best life now. And we just talked about this before service. Life is hard, but God. And life is great because of God. I experience the fruit of the Spirit: love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, gentleness, faithfulness, and self-control. And I haven't perfected them. And I'm a work in progress, but I can tell you, God has moved in me, and the things that I were weaker in over the last several years, I've just seen increase and get better. And I'm an entrepreneur at heart, and I've always looked for ways to do certain things better. I've always looked for new business ideas. I've looked for new ventures, and I've attempted many of them. And I got to tell you, I've failed at every venture I've been on except for one, and that's Apollo Computers. Everything I've tried in life, no matter how much money I spent, no matter how many hours I put into it, has been a failure. But nonetheless, I keep going. I don't know why. I don't know why it's like that. I fail, and something else comes along. Ooh, let's try that. So I would do it again. And it just happened, failure. And some of these ventures I've been on, I've prayed about. I believe that God had opened the door for me. Some of the things I knew I was pressing, it wasn't of God, it was me. But either way, failure. Or perhaps it's just what I considered a failure. And I started my last venture in 2017. It was a wireless internet company. There was a need for it. It was for early. We didn't have good internet service there. There was a need for it. I prayed about it. I had a partner. Nonetheless, failure. And I was actually able to sell that business back in 2018, and thank God that I was able to get out from underneath it, get it into some hands of some good people that knew what they were doing. But even for what I sold it for, I made a little bit of money, but not near enough to justify the blood, sweat, tears, and everything I had to put into this to make it work. It's just a failure. And I decided after that, when I sold that, I'm getting older now, and I'm tired of spending money and time on things that just don't pan out. And that's always been my attitude. Ooh, let's do it. It's always been my attitude. And I would try almost anything. But I just reached a point where, that's enough. And I made a commitment to myself that I'm not going to get involved in anything else. This is it. This Apollo is me and you to the end. We're going to ride off into the sunset together. That's the way I looked at it. And about 18 months ago, I woke up very early one morning, and with a thought that was so opposite of what I've been doing for the last 25 years. And my initial response was to consider my commitment to myself. No, I'm not doing it. There's no way. But every morning, I'd wake up early. When I say wake up early, my alarm clock goes off at 4 a.m. So waking up early is at 1, 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. So waking up early, and it happened day after day, day after day, day after day. Finally, I get this bright idea. I'm going to pray about it. So, Lord, is this you, or is this just some harebrained idea I have? And nonetheless, God didn't answer me. He didn't say, okay, Paul, do this. So I just put it out of my mind the next day. Same thing. Over and over and over again. So finally, I decided to look into this. And first thing I looked at was the cost. And that was a big resounding heck no. There's no way I'm doing this. And the next morning, same thing. Over and over and over again. And finally, I realized, okay, I've got to move forward in this. I feel like God is compelling me to take a step. And what was waking me up so early that day that I decided to put my hand to the plow, and it's okay if you laugh because some other people that I told this actually laughed at me, was PA school. And every odd of this even being possible is against me. From the moment I was compelled to pursue this, even up to today, the costs, the necessary prereqs, the PA shadowing. I called my personal PA and said, hey, can I meet with you? You know what he says? I'll come over to my house later. What? Yeah. So I go over there and I tell him what the Lord had put on my heart, and I said, this, and that, and also I need PA shadowing. And he says, Paul, we all work for the hospital, and we really don't do that. And he said, I'll tell you what, contact the HR lady at the hospital. And I said, well, who is it? I'll come to find out it's my neighbor that has been for the last 12 years. I know her husband well. I just didn't know what I know she worked at the hospital, but I didn't know what she did. And this entire journey has been like this, and my faith is starting to grow even more. And this is just one of the many scenarios that God had to perfectly align for this to even be possible. And I can remember in our life group several weeks ago, it's been a few months ago, but we were a couple of months, whatever, but we were talking, one of the things we had to do was say 3 things about ourselves. 2 of them had to be true, 1 of them had to be a lie. Yeah, it's that kind of group. Anyways, the lie I told was, I love chemistry. Some people guess that, some people don't. I hate chemistry. I didn't take chemistry in school. I didn't know anything about it. I know what a periodic table is, but not much more than that. But I had to take this chemistry class, and it's from a former professor at Howard Payne who has a doctorate. And man, it was so far over my head, I just could not grasp the concept. And I was praying about it. I was like, Lord, help me with this. Expand my mental capacity to grasp this stuff. And God spoke to me in that moment. And I'm telling you, this is not for me because I wouldn't have thought of this. But he said, when I call you to do something, I will give you the capacity to accomplish it. Folks, that's for everybody. That's for every one of you. When God calls you to do something, he will, walk in faith, walk in strength, because he will give you the capacity to accomplish it. How do I know this? Well, in Philippians 1, verse 6, it says, and I am certain that God, who began the good work within you, will continue his work until it's finally finished on the day when Christ returns. And so I submitted my application through the system that Hardin Simmons uses, and I heard nothing. I went to the open house they had back in May, their PA program open house, and I just wanted to make myself seen and known, let them know I'm serious. And I walked in there, and I was around so many young people. My gosh, was I insecure. I mean, you could put me in a room with 500 businessmen or women, and we could talk business all day long. And I wouldn't even break a bead of sweat on my forehead, because I know business. But it was so difficult to walk in there and stay in there. Sometimes just want to get up and walk out. I said, man, this is hard. But I pressed on. And afterwards, I joined their mission trip committee. And the same thing every month. We had this meeting, and I would walk in there, surrounded by young people, and just so insecure and intimidated. I pressed on. And still, I heard nothing. And you know, the odds of this, of me even being selected for this program, are incredibly slim. They get over 2,000 applications a year. This year I heard they had around 2,500, or last year. They select 30. I'm 46 years old. I'm twice the age of all these candidates I'm around. I'm bald. And I know what you're thinking, but Paul, you're a handsome bald guy. Okay, you weren't, but I was. I pressed on. And at this point in my journey, I've seen how God has moved and the doors he's opened that I thought were impossible. And my faith just continues to grow. And I firmly believe by this point, this is what God has called me to do. And so I just keep putting one foot in front of it. It doesn't matter the adversity I face or what certain people have said or laughed at. And you know, when I first decided to pursue this, I knew a lady that was currently in that PA program. And we weren't friends on Facebook, but I decided to send her a messenger message anyways, and I just wanted to ask her, you know, tell me a little bit about it, or what can you tell me about it? Give me some feedback, some input, something. And I didn't hear back from her. And I waited for like a week, and nothing. So I'm thinking, okay, either she doesn't remember who I am, or she doesn't have time to respond, or for whatever reason, she just can't get back to me. And it was a year later, this would have been back in October, a year later, I get a message from her. It says, OMG, I just got this message. I'm so sorry, call me, we'll talk. I'm like, cool. You know, so I called her, we talked, had a great conversation. She told me about the program and stuff, and then she said something that really surprised me. She said, I'll tell you what, I'm gonna do something else for you. I'm gonna name drop for you. I'm like, that's cool, but, you know, I'm not like Kanye or something. I'm Paul, you know? But nonetheless, cool. And she told me the program director was out of town for a couple of weeks. And she told me to message her in a couple of weeks. Hey, remind me about it, and I did. Well, on November 7th, this several weeks later, and I got a message from her at 6:17 in the morning, and she said, hey, my schedule's been crazy. I just had the opportunity to talk to the program director yesterday. Okay, cool, I thanked her. But 11:11 that same morning, I got email for an invitation to interview at Hardin-Simmons. I'm thinking, well, this is cool. I didn't know anything about it, but then I started talking to some others, and come to find out, this is the last cohort of interviews. They've most likely already selected all their candidates, all 30 of them. And if any of these candidates were even selected, they would basically be the backups to the backups. You know, so what's done is done. Nonetheless, I press on. And I get that email on a Thursday, and my interview is the following Wednesday, right? I don't even have a suit that'll fit me anymore. You know, I haven't worn a suit in I don't know how many years. And I went from a list of a few things to do to this massive list to prepare for an interview for med school. You know, so it's pretty crazy, right? But nonetheless, I show up, and I'm in a group. There's about 25 candidates in this cohort here that are interviewing. I gotta tell you, these kids, just young, smart, beautiful, professional, and most of them had already applied at 9 to 12 PA schools. Some of them had already been accepted. They just wanted to see what Hardin-Simmons had to offer. And here I am. I applied to one school. I'm the 46-year-old bald guy. You know, here I am. You want to talk about stand out? That's me in a room with all these young, beautiful people. Here, nonetheless, don't picture that. Anyways, this is a 7-hour ordeal, and I don't want to make it sound like it was a grueling 7-hour interview. It wasn't. Most of it was waiting. There were, I think, 3 different interviews. Met with a doctor, interviewed with a doctor, interviewed with the program director, and then at one point we had to play with Legos. It's kind of cool, but yeah, it's part of the interview process. But they had informed us early that morning that by the end of the day, we may get a letter, an email of acceptance or rejection, or we may hear nothing. And Sarah had gone with me that day because she wanted to go shopping. And so she's driving on the way home, and I had that phone in my hand, and I was just waiting for that email to come through. And it never did. And I was getting antsy, and then I started thinking, I had to recall where my faith was. And I just started praying. I said, Lord, you've called me to this. My trust is in you. And I just said, I thank you that I will start that PA school in August. That's when it starts. And that was it. And I just let it go. And you know, I share my testimony with you, not so you could say, poor picked on Paul, you had it so bad, and not so you could say, great job, but because I want to share the love of God. And I want to share his grace and his forgiveness. And I want to share how, no matter how messed up you think you are, or how good you think you are, God can, God will, and God does use you. Amen. Even at the moment, even right now, you think God is not using you. He is. You are valuable. And you know, I stand here today, I know how hard life is for so many people. I know how hard life has been for me, and it's not that it's easy now. And you know, as I was writing this part of this message, I began to pray and I asked God, how can I tell people how good you are when they're hurting? How can I share with that person that is struggling, that don't have money to pay their bills? How can I say how good is God? You know, people they have broken relationships. They deal with anxiety and fear and depression. You know, I don't know about you, but there's been times in my life that if you came up to me, hey, guess what, I got a new car, I'd just say, get out of my face, man. I'd probably say something else, but, you know, but how? God, how can I share that? Because I know so many people struggle. And as I was writing this, I wrote down, God said, comma, open quote. That was it, and I just prayed. And I didn't know what to say. How do you say that? And I just prayed. And I got to tell you, sometimes when I think about the struggles that people have, even at this moment, I had tears in my eyes thinking about the struggles that people go through and praying about it. And there was one scripture that came to mind, and it was 2 Corinthians 12, verse 9. It says, each time he said, my grace is all you need. My power works best in weakness. And I can tell you from experience that God's grace is all we need. And everything that we experience in life is seasonal. We have ups and we have downs. And when Murphy's Law seems like it's in full effect, it's in full force here, just remember that this too shall pass. God's grace is sufficient. You know, I heard a story one time to describe grace that was very profound to me, but it said, you know, if you were speeding down the highway, you're in a hurry for something, and the highway patrol pulls you over, and you say, officer, please, I'm in a hurry, this happened, that happened, please don't write me a ticket. And he says, okay, no problem, I'm not going to write you a ticket. How many of you would say that's grace? It's not. That's mercy. Grace says, hey, not only am I not going to write you a ticket, but here's $20. That's grace. And you know, people ask me, why this choice in life? Why the medical field? Well, two things. I actually started this path many years ago, back when I was a late teenager, early 20s. And I've always had a compassion for the poor and for those who could not afford health care, because I was one of them. The first time I seen a doctor outside of an emergency room visit was when I was 16 years old. So, I mean, you got a cold, suck it up. You got the flu, hope you get better. And if you got pneumonia, God be with you. You know? That was life. We couldn't afford doctors. But nonetheless, my heart is to help people who are like I was. And I know God knows my heart. And I believe that God is positioning me for his purpose. You know, in Psalm 37, I want to read verse 5 and 6. It says, commit everything you do to the Lord. Trust him, and he will help you. He will make your innocence radiate like the dawn, and the justice of your cause will shine like the noonday sun. And I've had that scripture. In fact, that's taped to one of my speakers at the office. Commit your actions to the Lord. The next morning after my interview at Hardin Simmons, I'm at work and I'm getting ready to head to my favorite class, chemistry. And I will tell you this, you know, when I prayed about that and God told me that, it's really surprising. I seem to struggle so much, but I actually finished that course with greater than 100, although they could only record 100 because of the way their system records it. So God is amazing for me to have that kind of score. But nonetheless, I'm getting ready, and I get a call from the doctor at Hardin, one of the doctors at Hardin Simmons, and this is the guy that I just didn't feel like it went too well with. And I mean, he kept telling me what he thought I was saying, and I said, no, that's not what I'm saying. And he said, well, I think this is what you're saying. And the normal me would have kept going, no, that's not, it would go back and forth. But I realized, no, just shut up. I just let it go. And he called me at 7:46 that morning, congratulating me on my acceptance to Hardin Simmons for their PA program. So, such a blessing. By God, you know. And let me sum this up for you. Okay, I'm a former alcoholic, addict, high school dropout, degenerate, thug, bum, hoodlum, good for nothing. I'm now a 46-year-old man, and I'm going to med school. And it's just crazy. And you see, I've been down many difficult roads in life, and most of these roads are one I've chosen. But God has always been there for me. And the series of events that had to fall in place for this to even be possible is divine. And I've only touched on a few of the things that happened. But God. And I want you to know that there's nothing special about me. The love, the grace, the forgiveness, and the blessing that God has given to me, he has for all of you as well. And if God has called you to do something, it's okay to be skeptical. I used to be afraid of that. I used to think if I doubted God, man, I'm going to be like Joseph and I can't speak until the baby's born. You know, or something like that. I used to be afraid of that stuff. But it's okay to be skeptical. It's okay to test whether it's you or if it really is from God. Especially for someone like me, because I jump into anything. But take heart, know that you could trust him, and he will see you through anything that he's called you to do. And I got to tell you, I'm a prime example of someone that this is just insurmountable. My history, my life, what it used to be, and now what God has called me to do. It's just crazy. I remember I shared this with Bob whenever I at first realized, okay, I'm going to pursue this. And I went to meet with Bob. I wanted to counsel with him and see what he says. And you know, he told me something after we were through talking. He said, you know, I could tell you that when you talk about this, there was just a glow about you. It's like, I didn't recognize that, but he could see that. Thank you, Bob. That was encouraging. But anyways, guys, that is my testimony that I wanted to share with you. Thank you for sharing your time with me this morning. Thank you, Bob.